Hi there, how are you? Welcome to the September edition of the Simic report. We're going to stick with tradition. We're going to dive straight into property management, then we'll hand the baton back over to sales. So Bernadette, what's been happening?
Can't believe we're in September already. Time's fly this year, and a lot's also happened. Just wanted to touch base in regards to the COVID laws that have taken place and the lease extension renewals as well to the 30th of September. So that's obviously coming up. We're only a couple of weeks away really from that. So if a tenant's lease was coming up for a renewal prior to the 30th of September, it automatically extended until the 30th of September. However, we did do a lot of lease negotiations with tenants and landlords, and obviously had extended their leases in regards to that. So that's something that's obviously that's coming up. The next thing I wanted to speak about is regards to arrears. So there was a lot of fear around tenants not paying rent, stop paying rent altogether because of COVID had come out. You know, I've lost my job, can't afford the rent. However, how we've managed that process is we've always ensured that the tenants have actually provided us information with regards to why they couldn't pay rent. So if they have lost their job, they had to provide evidence in regards to that. They had to provide evidence in regards to their income as well. So that was really important. There was the new law that had come out on the 24th of April. So that gave us the ability to be able to communicate with the tenants a lot more clearly. We had some new laws that had been taken in place, which we had to show a tenant a show cause notice, which allowed the tenants 14 days to be able to provide evidence if they are COVID affected. However, if a tenant didn't provide us that evidence and they weren't COVID affected, that means that the normal laws applied, which means that on day 8 we could reach the tenant for rent arrears and obviously follow that normal law process. So it was really, it's really important, I guess, on our end of things as property managers to ensure that communication was there, but also that tenants were aware of what their obligations are and what they had to do to provide us that information.
So just in brief, the extension, the automatic extension, that's if the tenant opted to elect that, if they were COVID affected, automatically got extended to September 30. To our knowledge, that's not being extended any further. So even if they're COVID affected beyond September 30, their lease is ending on the 10th of October and the owner's provided the sufficient notice prior to that, tenant does have to vacate at the end of their lease. Their automatic extension, that comes to an end September 30. And that all tied into April 24th, as you mentioned, with regards to the legislation that passed Queensland Parliament, which is in relation to COVID. It's interesting that you talk about it's a tale of two sides of the coin, because it's had a significant impact in the way things have been taking place within the property management space. Very much, and I would suggest that the trend has, what I'm about to say in sales has been reflective also in the property management space, where go back 2, 3, 4 months ago, there was heavy discussions, heavy dialogue, heavy language. In your world, tenants / landlords, in my world, buyers and sellers, particularly buyers. Over the last 1 or 2 months, we're not hearing as much dialogue, and I dare say you're probably not hearing as many tenants reaching out saying, I'm COVID affected. Not like in the earlier months, say March, April, and into May, and then it started to fizzle away. In my world, March, April, May, heavy discussions around COVID, what property values we're going to do, buyers thinking they were going to get a reduction on purchase price of 20, 30, 40%. Those numbers haven't come to fruition. We spoke about that previously. My point in the September edition is the language and the dialogue has basically completely dissipated from the market. We're not hearing buyers having discussions or mentioning or using the word COVID as leverage to negotiate price down. I think they're coming to terms with the fact that when they're going through open homes, they're seeing the number of buyers, the volumes are up. Okay, where traditionally now going into spring is traditionally the highest selling season within the calendar. So the discussions of the dialogue around COVID is completely dissipated. And the fact that they're seeing all these other people around the open homes, they're not using it as leverage because it's just hasn't come to fruition. What has actually happened, and what we're seeing is, traditionally 12 months ago, if you were to make an offer on a property as a buyer, and if you were the vendor receiving that offer, you would expect to see, this is a property outside of an auction. Auctions are an unconditional sale. And any property selling with a price practically 100% of the time would have subject to finance. Traditionally, 7 days if they're pre-approved, 14 days was a very common time frame. At the moment, practically impossible to see a 14-day finance clause in a contract. We're seeing 21 and 28 days as the standard subject to finance periods. Now that's not because of the buyers wanting to, they're not driving that. It's the backlog with the banks, with the amount of applications that they've got coming through. It's just purely taking that long. There are some lenders that are taking up to 14 to 21 days to just simply pick up the file and start processing someone's loan application. So 21 to 28 days, very normal within the current climate. We're also seeing a number of the major lenders have now started outsourcing or pushing offshore processing to help the backlog push through. So all of that culminates and comes together with the number of buyers we're seeing at open homes, with the language of COVID dissipating over the last month or two. And I don't think we're going to hear too much of it till the rest of the year. I think we're going to see a very traditional spring selling period. Stock is still tight, there's no question of that. Massive influx of properties coming to market that was speculated earlier this year hasn't come to fruition either. So it's an interesting time in the real estate space. The energy's there, both in the property management space and sales. I'm seeing the number of applications just flying through the door. There are loads of those and offers coming in on practically every property on the market. So solid market. We expect to see that right the way through to Christmas. But as always, we'll touch base with you in the October edition of the Simic Report. We'll see you then. Cheers.